Hey everyone, I'm Mike Witt with Contech Industries, and today I have with me Scott Wyatt from Bush Protective. And today we're going to talk about the 5 common misconceptions about ballistic helmets. Before we get started, Scott, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Scott Wyatt. I'm the president of Bush Protective USA, and we are the premier law enforcement helmet manufacturer globally.
Awesome. So, to get started today, we kind of briefly chatted before we started about some common themes that we see in the industry about misconceptions that people might have about ballistic helmets. So, to get started, a common misconception that helmets are truly NIJ certified products. Can you tell me more about that? 'Cause that seems to be a theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you what, almost every law enforcement agency that I interact with and I come in, they are shocked to find out that their helmets are not certified. Because the assumption is their body armor, their plates, their tactical armor, it all goes through a rigorous NIJ certification process.
Yep.
That's not the case with helmets. So a little bit of background, the original helmet testing that they did was back in 1975. And what they were doing was they were taking military helmets from the post-Vietnam era, and then they got the idea they wanted to start selling them in the United States into law enforcement. So basically it's a military helmet. They threw a couple suggested testing scenarios at it from 1971. They revised it in 1981. But basically they were testing it against a .357 Magnum and a 9mm at low velocity, 1,150 feet per second.
Yep.
So people assume that they're tested. They assume they're certified. It's not the case. They are simply, they test against penetration, but that's it.
Right. And in these types of scenarios, typically, imagine most manufacturers that are 3A certified or 3A protected on the helmet, most of those are being sent out to labs, and they just run the NIJ 3A test protocol against that, but it's not inherently certified by the National Institute of Justice.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So what they're doing is, and we do the same thing
Sure.
as our entry-level testing process.
Right.
But then we obviously go above and beyond.
Yep.
So if you think about it, what we do is we take that helmet, we send it to an independent lab, just like the rest of the manufacturers do. And what we all do is we basically shoot it with a 9mm round at the lower velocity, the slower velocity. And then we also, and I don't know who came up with the original idea, they'd said, hey, let's shoot a .44 Magnum into the helmet, and then we'll call it a 3A.
Right.
To kind of mirror similar to what is done in the body armor, but it's not even an exact comparison because the 3A body armor, you're not testing a 9mm.
Right.
You're testing a .357 SIG.
Yep.
So, but again, all we do is we shoot it 5 rounds into a helmet, 1 on each side, 1 in the back, 1 in the front, 1 in the crown. As long as there's no penetration, then that helmet manufacturer says, oh yeah, it's NIJ 3A.
Right.
But again, there's no certification process, there's no standardized verification, there's no subsequent testing after the fact.
Right, yep.
It's the Wild West out
Yep.
there.
Yep, absolutely. Well, perfect. Another common misconception is that a lot of reputable helmet systems are made solely in America. Can you tell me a bit about that? Because that seems also to be a...
Yeah, and look, American manufacturing and the work ethic that we have here is amazing. Our parent company, we produce most of our shells and some of the components in Germany. Incredible engineering, phenomenal production work. Sometimes people say, well, I only want a helmet that's purely made in the U.S. I get that.
Sure.
We basically bring our components in from Germany. We bring many of the components. A lot of the components are U.S. sourced, manufactured. Then we do custom kitting and assembly here in the U.S.
Right.
There are a lot of 3A helmets out there that are in the marketplace that are sold online that are actually coming in with shells that are produced in Asia, various parts of Africa, India. Not saying that they're not good components, but you can't verify the supply chain,
Yep.
Especially on the raw materials, and that's such a critical aspect of the ballistic component. So a lot of manufacturers are buying shells. They're bringing them in from wherever in Asia,
Yep.
and then they're putting them together. They don't get the same consistency and they don't get the same performance. So I think it's important that you have a U.S. component for U.S. law enforcement of the testing, the assembly. Our testing is only done in the U.S. Our raw material suppliers with DuPont and all the aramids, that chain of custody is huge.
For
So,
sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Another thing, that misconception we kind of want to hit on is that helmet systems are agnostic, right? So there's not a lot of thought given to the interfacing of comms equipment or any other accessories that goes into helmets. Tell us a bit more about that, because it seems like customers sometimes are shocked after the fact when they learn, oh, this doesn't connect with that, right? So what's your guys' experience on that?
So I'll tell you, probably the biggest challenge that we face sometimes are when you get an agency that has made a decision on one component, let's say it's the ear protection, and they haven't thought about the helmet. Or they've separated the helmet from acquisition from another part. They've had two different people working on it.
Yep.
And you're right, they don't seamlessly flow. A perfect example, I had a department recently said, hey, we got these helmets. Our department issued us these helmets, and they're mid-cut. So about another inch of ballistic protection.
Yep.
But our Ear Pro, we want to use the arc wire arms, the 3M ones, and they don't click in. What do we do? Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Should have thought about that before you bought the whole system. So
Right.
I think you've got to take into account how are you going to run your setup. And these days, not every operator in a unit is running the same setup.
Right.
The snipers might need a high-cut helmet so that they can get a specific cheek welder position down there, whereas the breacher or the cutter, that guy might want a full-cut helmet with a ballistic visor. So that you've got to take all of these features into account. Secondly, helmet covers, Velcro. Nowadays, a lot of teams are running cameras on here. Do the cameras integrate with the rails? And if you're going to run Ear Pro that's going to use your rail, well, guess what? You can't run a camera right there.
Right.
So taking into account all of those different features, the IR strobes, the NOD battery pack, what NODs you're going to use, I would say that's a huge thing you got to take into account.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Another misconception that we kind of brought up is that environmental factors typically aren't assessed when assessing the performance of a helmet, the ballistic performance. Also, a misconception, right, where humidity, temperature, all those things, necessarily aren't really thought about or taken into account when helmets are purchased. Can you tell me a bit more about that on your side of the house?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that I think most people don't think about is the environment that you're operating in, whether it's hot, whether it's cold. How is that going to affect your gear? Not just from the comfort, but specifically what we're worried about is the ballistic protection.
Yeah.
So, our AMP-1TP is not a polyethylene helmet. Polyethylene is generally used in the lighter weight helmets, the frag helmets, the military. They're wearing those for, like I said, 12, 14, 16 hours.
Yep.
The problem is when a helmet gets heated up, specifically a polyethylene helmet, when a temperature goes over that 130, 140 degrees, polyethylene is essentially a plastic.
Yep.
It starts to get soft, and if you have a ballistic event on a helmet that's a polyethylene, all of a sudden the ballistic performance can decrease by maybe up to 50%.
Right.
That's a huge component.
Yeah.
So there's even a helmet manufacturer out there that has on their warranty, it says, your warranty is void if you keep it in a hot environment, such as the trunk of your squad car.
Yeah.
Where does everybody keep their helmet? In the trunk of the car.
Yep.
So as part of the VPAM testing, and then also as part of like the FBI DEA protocol, the helmets all have to be heated up. They're plus 70 Fahrenheit for VPAM. It's plus 140 for the FBI protocol.
Okay.
So really that's meant to simulate hot environment, trunk in a car,
and
how's it going to perform. And
Yep.
that helmet has to still meet that stringent requirement, which is why ours does and most others don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the last misconception that we kind of want to hit on is the thought and concept that lighter is always better, right? So I think I'll let you get into this, but I think a lot of this is mission and timing dependent, right, on what you're actually doing, how long you're going to be out there. My perspective on it is the main purpose of a ballistic helmet is to provide ballistic performance. So that's going to be the number one factor I personally am going to look at before it comes to weight or comfort or anything like that. Those are all taken into consideration for sure. But ultimately, if I'm wearing that helmet to protect my dome from ballistic or fragmentation threats, that's the first factor I'm looking at. So what's your take and Bush Protective's take on the lighter's better kind of approach to helmet shopping?
Sure. Well, I think all the manufacturers are doing everything they can to make the products as light as possible, right? Yep. I mean, we want our guys to be fast. We want them to be comfortable. We recognize that fatigue is a factor in officer safety. Yep. Having said that, you've got to pick the right product for the mission. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And for domestic law enforcement applications, whether it's SWAT or patrol or whatever it may be, what we're being told, and we spoke to numerous teams out there, how long do you guys have your helmet on your heads, realistically? And the most hardcore teams that seem to be sitting on a house longer than anywhere, rarely is it more than an hour. Usually it's, hey, we know when we're going to hit a house, we get ready, we kit up, we want to be as protected as possible, and then half an hour later we're done, we're taking it off. Now, if someone's got to stand post and they're wearing that helmet for 12 hours, man, lightweight is the way to go.
Sure.
And even to the point where I would say you would want to sacrifice ballistic protection to get that lighter weight.
Right.
Because otherwise the fatigue on the neck, especially over days, weeks, months, years, clearly that's what the military is going for. But for law enforcement applications, I think a little extra weight is worth it, especially for the ballistic protection. Hands down, there's just no question.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's great. But yeah, so I think that kind of hits the nail on the head, like you said, on these 5 common misconceptions that Scott comes across while out there on the road interfacing with law enforcement, military, and the like. So again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at info@contechindustries.com, or feel free to reach out to Scott at bushprousa.com, and they'll be happy to help you.
Thanks very much. This is Scott White with Bush Protective. You can also check out some videos on the performance of our helmets on YouTube.